Hello, everyone. Welcome to the NTI Pod Talk. My name is Dianne Kestrel, and I'm the Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute. This Pod Talk is our opportunity to have fun conversations with interesting people who have interesting things to say about nutrition, food, and health. I talk to NTI instructors, students and grads, to health industry professionals, to farmers, and anyone else who has an interest in nutritional wellness. While many of our listeners come from within the NTI community as students and grads, we also have prospective students who tune in. And to those listeners in particular, I hope you find that the people we talk to inspire you to finally make the jump to pursue your passion and come to school here at NTI. So without further ado, let's get on with the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the NTI Pod Talk. My name is Dianne Kestrel. I'm the Director of Nutrition Therapy Institute, and we have a fun guest today. I'm really excited to hear more from our guest, Kestrel Burcham, who is Policy Director for the Cornucopia Institute. And I'm going to have Kestrel talk more about the Cornucopia Institute, but just as a sort of an overarching primer of who they are. They are an organization that advocates for the safeguarding of organic standards in farming. At least that's my take on what they do and how I know about the Cornucopia Institute overall. So thank you so much, Kestrel, for being here. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's just kind of as an introduction, tell us about sort of your interest in organic agriculture and how you came to this area of thought in terms of food and food quality.
Yeah, I have throughout my entire life, a long history of involvement in food and the food system. My parents are organic farmers on the side as like a hobby. And my mother has studied nutrition as well. So I was kind of seeped in this from day one with like the huge backyard garden and growing a lot of our own food, and was very privileged to have that in my background. I did study some animal science in undergrad and then eventually went on to law school where I specialized in environmental and natural resource law. And I was very interested in, at the time, the use of public lands and how that intersects with agriculture. And then kind of got more and more interested in organic standards and organic food as I started experiencing health issues and found that relationship with food kind of changed through that evolving relationship with my own health. And then I started working for the Cornucopia Institute in 2015, and it's been onwards and upwards since then, essentially learning more about what goes on in the organic system and agriculture as a whole. Every day I work here, and really being involved in the regulatory process is always interesting and rewarding, and also an enormous headache at the same time.
Well, yeah, and I would like to ask some questions about that because I think that potentially there are things about organic farming, the organic label, that people have assumptions about that we may be surprised to learn are incorrect. And I would like you to talk about that. But before we do that, can you talk a little bit more about the Cornucopia Institute? Maybe if I wasn't correct in exactly what you do there, what the Cornucopia Institute is and what they do, if you could expand on that a little bit. And then a little bit more about what your role is as the policy director.
Yeah, sure. So Cornucopia's mission is to uncover the truth behind organic food, and we advocate for an organic label that can be trusted, essentially. Mm-hmm. So your idea is slotted into that pretty neatly. But we do even more than like working in the regulatory sphere, trying to protect or increase strength of standards. We do a lot of consumer education on all aspects of organic ag and just agriculture in general, because it kind of you can't necessarily learn about organic ag only looking at organic food. You have to kind of look at the whole system.
Right.
And that whole system includes the regulatory standards, the policies, both state policies, local policies, governmental policies, is all kind of this melange and array of complexity that is really difficult to understand if you're just a casual consumer. So we really try and make that information, that confusing information and often misleading propaganda from the industry, we sort of try and make it more accessible to the average consumer. And then we also have deeper dives, research, analysis, white papers, and things for other policy folks and consumers who want to like really dig into the meat of it. But our scorecards are more for, we have scorecards that deal with rating different brands in the organic world to help that quick education for consumer looking to try and find the best food for their family. And then all the way up to like our more dense reports. So we have like a lot of resources in that field. And then we also do a lot of work in the back end. And my role as policy director, what I'm primarily doing, the meat of my work is in the regulatory area. So I work with a lot of other nonprofits on these kinds of things, but I do a lot of work commenting to the government when regulations come through and also advocating for regulation on top of that. And just basically trying to push policies that we want to see. So like the organic standards right now are not our ideal organic standards, but we can envision organic standards or an organic label that is what we want. So that's kind of, we always have this idea of more of an authentic organic, which is what consumers believe the organic label to be often. And we're pushing towards that essentially with regulatory work.
So can you talk about, give, maybe a couple of examples of where we as the casual consumer may be unaware of maybe some challenges with what we believe to be true about the organic label and the organic standards? I know you know everything very in detail, but kind of just a general overview of maybe some of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest challenges in just the organic marketplace right now is that there is a fairly wide variety of practices that all meet these minimum standards. And unless you're really have the time to dig into each brand, each product, and you understand what you're getting, like a lot of people don't understand the ins and outs of like what makes cattle tick, right? You shouldn't have to get good food. But you can have in the organic marketplace, you can have very large, more industrialized type farms, and you can have little tiny, farms that are your local CSA, your local, farm store pickup, and they're all organic. It doesn't make the organic label not meaningful. There's still standards that are a minimum bar that the big farms, for the most part, and the small farms are meeting. It's just a matter of like understanding that organic doesn't mean a certain scale. All the scales are pretty much available at organic. One of Cornucopia's other roles is to be a watchdog for the industry to try and find that fraud where it is happening. And I can say happily that fraud is getting better over time. So I think that is less of a concern than it used to be, but we're certainly still keeping an eye out for that. and advocating for strong enforcement, because enforcement is important when, people are relying on this label to make sure their family has the food they want.
Yeah. So as a nutrition school, we talk a lot about food quality and, in terms of health outcomes, one of the things we talk about a lot is avoiding as much as possible chemicals and toxins. And one of the first things that shows up on the list of ways to avoid chemicals and toxins is purchasing, when you can, as much as possible, purchasing things that have the organic label. Although I'm pretty clear in my own understanding that that doesn't mean that there are zero chemicals used. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think the organic label assures that there are zero chemicals being used, because there are some chemicals, potentially, again, I'm being really vague here because I don't know for sure, that are approved in the organic standards. So, and my assumption would be that that might be some of the larger organizations, sort of the corporate farming organizations that use those chemicals. Again, I'm making assumptions here, more so than the small, local neighborhood CSA. So if you could comment on anything I said and make any corrections to what I said.
Yeah, so that's one interesting thing about the scale in organic is those minimum standards apply to everyone. So if there's something prohibited for one, it's prohibited for everyone. And in general, this is something that anti-organic propaganda really likes to hang their hat on. They say, oh, pesticides are still used in organic, but there's context there that they won't tell you. And it's that the majority of synthetic pesticides and synthetic fertilizers are prohibited in organic, flat out, not able to be used. If you use them, you're non-compliant and you're in trouble.
Yeah.
There's a process to allow some synthetic substances for use in organic. And it's a very involved process where there's multiple checks and balances and levels they have to go through, including a human health analysis and environmental impact analysis, among other things. Some of the synthetic pesticides that are allowed for use in organic are things like soap, which is a pesticide. It's used as an insecticide usually, but is very safe for human health. It's very safe for the environment in general. But it's technically a pesticide. So when someone says, oh, or pesticides can be used in organic, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. And anyone can go look at the national list of approved substances on the USDA's website. And we do have a lot of educational materials and are coming out with more all the time on the national list. It's basically a list of what's allowed and in what circumstances, because often these products that are allowed are only allowed in like a very narrow band of circumstances. Like a good example would be certain livestock drugs that are only allowed for use in like an emergency, where the animal welfare is an issue.
Right.
And a lot of these substances, specifically with livestock, there's like this tension between animal welfare and some things that are prohibited in organic. So like antibiotics, for example, antibiotics are not allowed under organic, right? That is true. That is accurate. But there's some complexity there. Again, there's always like these weird little nuances in the regulations that can be confusing, is that your producers are still required to administer antibiotics if the animal needs it to save, like for their health and safety. The thing is that the animal is then removed from organic and cannot be sold as organic. So I've had people tell me, oh, but organics does allow administration of antibiotics. I'm like, yeah, that's true. It says, in fact, that you must to protect the health, animal welfare, right?
Mhm.
But you're not going to see that meat or dairy or whatever it's being sold as organic after that. So again, there's like these little nuances in the standards that people will latch onto, but it's really very complex and detailed, and it's difficult to,
Yeah.
people dump that. But in general, all organic farming has a general blanket of synthetic pesticides and synthetic fertilizers are prohibited with that unless,
Mhm.
and antibiotics and hormones are prohibited. And then they also have those transition period where you become organic basically over 3 years. And there's all these other aspects that make organic what it is. Like, for example, you're required to do certain farming methods, which I think are particularly interesting to your listeners, because these farming methods are generally shown to improve nutrition,
Mhm.
like cover cropping, using compost, doing all these different things. Those are also required to be used to the fullest extent possible, I believe is the phrasing, on organic farms. So things like that all have an impact on the food we're eating, and not just like our exposure to toxins, but also what kind of nutrition we're getting. So it is an important consideration.
Mhm. Yeah. And the other thing that is not allowed in organics is genetic modification, so no GMOs. And yeah, I definitely, still rely on the organic label as my threshold for food quality. I just wanted to get your take on exactly what you said, that there are potentially some caveats, but then, particularly with the animals, they are removed from that system. So that's, or from being sold as organic. So that's good to know. The other thing I was going to mention is, yes, you are right that our audience is very interested in the nutritional benefits of organic. And my understanding is that the nutritional benefit comes from the fact that in doing those farming practices, like cover crops, like, using manure, those kinds of things, that improves the microbial diversity of the soil, and that microbial diversity of the soil is what improves the nutritional profile of the plants, and therefore the animals that eat those plants. It's a cycle. So is there anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much interesting research coming out. The past 5 years have been just research study after research study. And before that, we didn't have really good research because they were studying organic practices, but they were taking like a conventional field and then stopping the pesticides for 1 year. And of course, those plants we're not going to do well, right? Because you have like a dead or a challenged soil. And it does take time to build up that good soil. It takes more than 3 years to really get a good working organic soil. And for folks really interested in some of the long-term farm system trials, I recommend checking out Rodale's work. But other research from the Bionutrient Institute is really interesting because they also look at nutrition based on cultivation practices, like we're talking about the cover cropping and all that. And another thing that I find so exciting and fascinating is when you have a conventional system where you're using synthetic fertilizers, which people don't talk about a lot, but we're basically dumping nitrogen onto the soil. And also then synthetic pesticides to protect from pests on top of that. You're creating plant growth that is very propped up and kind of like not healthy in its own right. Because it's living in a very sterile bubble and it can't really deal with issues on its own, right? So the conventional system perpetuates itself in this way, where if you'd have a plant or crops that are used to this kind of treatment, they're absolutely not going to do well if you remove it, because they don't have the physiological ability to do that.
Mhm.
In a system where you're not relying on all these chemical like crutches, which is kind of how I think of it.
Mhm.
You have a plant that is responding to its environment and more part of its environment. And a lot of the things in plant nutrition specifically that I don't think get enough attention are flavonoids and polyphenols and these micronutrients that we're really in research starting to realize are very important for human health, but have not really been considered. Usually we only thought about macronutrients, and macronutrients for organic and conventional food are basically the same, right? So same protein, same fat, but the micronutrients, the polyphenols, the flavonoids, very, very different. And the reason is because those compounds are created by the plant to protect the plant and to help the plant. So they're the plant's insecticides, natural protection against UV, natural protection against stress from weather, so, and those things again are beneficial to the people eating them. So it's very, as you can probably tell, I'm really fascinated by all this research.
Yeah, I am too. And I think that the polyphenol, flavonoid content is even higher because the plants are exposed to more stresses, like they're living in the real world, right? Not like, as you said earlier, in this protective bubble. They're living in the real world, exposed to all kinds of things. And when the plant stress level is higher, they're producing more of those polyphenols and flavonoids and all of those things, because as you say, those are the plant's protection. So it is fascinating. It's amazing. And then when the animals eat those plants, the animals also become a source of the polyphenols. Yeah. His name is escaping me right now. The researcher that wrote all the book or did all the work. He wrote the book Nourishment. Gosh darn, I can't remember his name. But anyways, he talks about how animals, the foods that we get from animals are really high in polyphenols and flavonoids when they're eating these plants that are experiencing stress. And he talks about, it's almost like you can get a salad by eating a steak because they're so high in polyphenols. Anyways, yeah, it is fascinating. It's amazing. So I wanted to ask, because I sort of expect and believe that, the organic sector of the food market is continuously growing. I don't know what the statistics are. You probably know way more than I do, but it's some large section of the food sector and growing. And that propels large corporations to want to get in on organics, not because they believe in the concept of organics, but because they want a part of that market share. Is there a risk, or have you seen that with the entry of these large organizations, there is an attempt or even successful efforts to water down the organic standards? Do they try to influence the government to water down the organic standards?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right that as organic has grown, it's become more and more interesting to large, mostly conventional agribusiness, and they have infiltrated the organic system. And they absolutely do exert some strong political pressure on the regulatory end. we do see that. And I will say that there is a strong movement, of which Cornucopia is part of, to push against that, not just from nonprofits, but from consumers, from some politicians. But it's a fight that is ongoing, let's just say. I mean, a good example is there was recently a proposed rule released called the Organic Livestock and Poultry Standards Rule, which is intended to update and improve the animal welfare aspects of the standards. And there are certain industrial companies that are absolutely opposed and are fighting it tooth and nail. But we're still seeing those regulations and updates coming forward and generally being largely supported by the community. So, we just have to keep fighting, I guess would be my message. And consumer voices are actually really powerful here, especially if they have representatives in the ag committees and Congress and things like that. You'd be surprised how powerful those consumer voices would be. And I think that's really hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I appreciate, I am a supporter of Cornucopia Institute, and as a thank you gift this year for my financial support, I got a poster from the Cornucopia Institute that says "Who owns organic?" And I've seen these kinds of things all over the place, but I took that poster and I put it up in our teaching kitchen here. In addition to our nutrition training program, we also have a natural food chef training program, and we've got a professional training kitchen here at our location. So I put that poster up on the wall, right next to the refrigerator. But what I love about it is it really identifies the companies that really own the large agribusiness companies that really own a large portion of these products that are labeled organic, that consumers may not realize that they're actually financially supporting the large agribusiness companies. Now, having just said that, I want to say that I don't distrust that they actually are organic, those products. But, just as you were saying, the consumer voice has tremendous power over, the decisions that are being made. And part of our voice is where we spend our money. And so it's really helpful to know that while you may be purchasing something that is, yes, organic, if it's still owned by that large agribusiness company, then you are giving them sort of validating their desire to be in this field and their their financial gain by being in the organic industry. And then they get more power, more control, more of that stuff. So I really appreciate having access to that information. And I know our chefs like seeing it there on the wall. They're like, oh, wow, I had no idea. And then an accompaniment to that poster was another poster that shows these are the true organics, these companies, these brands are the true organics. And so, that educational information, like you said, the Cornucopia Institute, one of the purposes is for consumer education. That is really helpful, and I greatly appreciate that. So, do you have anything to add to that line of thought?
Well, I'm really glad you found that useful. It is really interesting to see recognizable brands are often owned by these huge corporations, but you don't see that anywhere on the packaging.
Right.
And I like that you said that they're still organic, because yes, they are. And I see it both ways. I see it as we need to take extra care to support the small and 100% organic brands if we can. Mm-hmm. But also, the more of the conventional ag we can convert to organic, the better for humans and better for the environment too. So
yes, that is true.
It's all I honestly don't want to have anyone feel shame or guilt for buying any of those products, because I'm every cent towards the organic marketplace really helps change from conventional, which is a harmful system of agriculture. But I mean, there are some local organic brands that are 100% organic that I absolutely adore. And I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I just want these smaller brands that are really dedicated to get more attention too. So if folks have those in their area, please, also just write them and say, hey, thank you for doing this, thank you for being so dedicated. Because again, that consumer telling their truth is uplifting, powerful in every aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly agree with you. I don't want to shame anyone for their choices and their purchases as well, certainly. But I think it is important that we are well educated about, so that we can make informed decisions. And like you say, there's nothing on the label that tells you who actually owns that company. And so you need to do a little bit of investigation, a little bit of education, and then you can make a decision based on, incorporating that. And I mean, there are some brands that are on that list that are owned by the big companies that I buy because it's the only thing that I have access to that is organic. And I still value the fact that it is organic. And I totally agree with you. The more we push conventional production towards a more organic model in whatever way we can, that's great. And if we can push all the big companies towards doing 100% organic, then that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's always a tricky concept of wanting to support small farms, but also support anything that is not that harmful type of agriculture. You can do both. I guess that's the good news, right? You can do both at once. And honestly, we hear from consumers all the time that do not have access to small local farms, like they're living in a big city or whatever it may be. And these national brands offer that, so that's great. But at the same time, if you do live someplace where there's small local farmers, you're going to get some of the best nutritious, dense, fresh is another aspect, food, if you can get it locally to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that kind of leads into the last topic that I wanted to talk about, and that is, you mentioned earlier about the scorecards. So the Cornucopia Institute scorecards, I really love them. Could you talk about what they are and what food categories are covered in the scorecards? Because I know that when I first started seeing them, there was cereals and yogurt. But now I know you have more. So can you talk about them and the food categories?
Yeah, so folks can find our scorecards on our website, and our website is www.cornucopia.org, and the scorecards are /scorecards. And our major commodities that we have scorecards for are organic eggs, organic dairy, organic beef, organic poultry, so that's like turkey and chicken meat. And then we have the organic yogurt, like you mentioned, plant-based beverages, so like your soy milks, your oat milks, those kinds of things. We have a snack bar scorecard too, and cottage cheese, cereal, organic soy, and then we have a couple guides as well. So guides for how to avoid soilless organic produce and how to avoid carrageenan in food. And all those can be found on our website. And I will say our egg scorecard is our most popular one, just as far as traffic goes. And we are updating it actively now. We just did a big full update, and we have a bunch of accompanying articles and things that are coming out soon regarding organic eggs. So if folks are interested in organic eggs, there's going to be a lot of fresh material basically on that. And each scorecard is a little different, but essentially we rate brands, all the organic brands. So we don't do conventional, we just do organic. And we rate them on various criteria, depending on the commodity. So they're all a little different. Like organic dairy, for example, we rate based on the quality of their grazing, and animal welfare. Beef, we talk about some environmental issues. Organic eggs and poultry, a lot of the focus is on the quality of outdoor access. And then some of the other guides and things deal just with ingredients. So like yogurt and plant-based beverages, we talk about like sourcing for ingredients and additives and things like that. So there's a bunch of data there. And yeah, I'm glad people find them useful.
Yeah.
A lot of research people don't have to do themselves.
Right, exactly. And what I appreciate is that it's my understanding that, you know, in order to actually provide the ratings on the scorecards, you do, you know, an investigation. And I don't know, it's probably not like, you know, secret spy investigation, but you do investigation. You actually want to talk to the people, maybe even visit the farms. I don't know if you are able to visit all of them, but and so you do a lot of the legwork, so to speak, so that we as consumers can make informed decisions. And I greatly appreciate that. When I first found the one for yogurt, I printed it out and carried it in my purse for a while because you know, surprisingly, several of the brands that you had listed on the scorecard are ones that I can get at my local natural foods grocery store. And I went by the scorecard. You know, the one that had the highest rating is the one that I purchased and, you know, still purchase today. So I really appreciate that.
Yes, we do independent investigation for each brand, and transparency rates pretty highly. So like brands that are transparent with us, they fill out a survey that we have, and then they also talk to us and answer our questions. And then we also add on our own independent, we don't just rely on what the brands tell us. Mm-hmm. We have our own independent investigation. We have not been doing farm visits for the past 2 years due to safety concerns.
Sure.
But we are restarting that now. We actually have an organic investigator that just joined our team who's going to be heading up in-person watchdogging investigations for industrial brands, and also doing a lot of the visiting of brands on our scorecard, from the good to the bad, right? So we're going to do the whole range. But all staff sort of participate in going to farms and checking them out for the scorecards. So yeah, we put a lot of work into it, and we try and keep it as updated as possible. And we also, for brands that haven't responded or participated, they often rate lower because we can't find out as much about them. Because there's some things on our scorecards that are like very nitty-gritty. You will not find that information online or in any way, unless the brand is like willing to talk to you or have you visit the farms. So if consumers are on our scorecards and see that the brand they like rates really poorly, and it's because they don't participate, sometimes it takes a few consumers nudging the brand to get them to like open up and be more transparent, both with their consumers and with us. And so again, just like this synergy between consumers and transparency in the marketplace is another reason that we have these scorecards, because I think that for our food to be trustworthy, we need to know what's going into it. And so for us, transparency in the food system is part of what we do, part of what we advocate for, in organic, but you know, in the food system as a whole too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate all the information that I get from Cornucopia Institute. I value the work that you do. You know, I support a little more than a handful of organizations on a regular basis, and Cornucopia is one of them, because you help me make better decisions and save me a lot of time in making those decisions. And so I greatly appreciate it. So thank you to you and all of everyone involved at the Cornucopia Institute. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you mentioned the website once already, but if you could mention that again and then talk about any other social media handles or whatever they're called that we should know about. If you could just go over those one more time.
Yeah, sure. Our website is www.cornucopia.org. And you can find links to all our social media there. We're on pretty much every platform as the Cornucopia Institute. And we also do have a free e-newsletter that you can get, like news of our new scorecard releases, and also sometimes action alerts that we're going for regulatory issues that are coming up or other things. So I encourage everyone to sign up for our free e-news. It's just on our website in the top right corner in most browsers, I think. Yeah, and that's the best place to find info about us.
Great. Good. Well, thank you so much for your time. It has been a really interesting conversation. You helped clarify a few things for me and set me straight on a couple of things, but also really validated. I'm still going to tell people that they should, focus on organic and buy as much organic as they can, no matter what they believe about any, inhibitions or whatever to the organic label. It's still my threshold for highest quality food. So you have helped solidify that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for supporting us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, have a great rest of your day. And, I'm looking forward to looking at some of those other scorecards that I haven't looked at yet. So thanks.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Hi there, and thanks for listening today. If what you heard today inspires you to want to pursue an education in holistic nutrition here at Nutrition Therapy Institute, please check us out on our website, ntischool.com, and reach out to us at admissions@ntischool.com. Our in-depth, comprehensive education is sure to provide you with the knowledge and skills you need to create the work of your dreams. Do something that feeds your passion, aligns with your values, and fuels your drive for a vital and meaningful life. It will be rewarding for yourself, your family, and anyone else with whom you interact. And with that, see you on the next episode.